So as I said, we're going to be looking at the past 50 years of music. So we're going to start the late 40s and early 50s generation of music, which probably most notably includes the birth of rock and roll. So to kind of warm people up to that idea, let's roll a quick little clip about some of the early 50s rock and roll.
Well, Bebop Lula, she's my baby. Bebop Lula, you shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much of love drives a man insane. Little Joe is blowing on the slide trombone. The drummer boy from Illinois would crash, boom, bang. The whole rhythm section was a purple gang, let's rock.
So that gives you just a little taste of some of the rock and roll that was going on late 40s, early 50s generation of music. Where I want to start the conversation for tonight is talking about some of the perceptions about that generation of music, which really are reflected in just about any generation of culture, any generation of music, and that's that a lot of the parents and a lot of the older people in that era thought that the music was evil and, quote, the devil's music, which I think is really funny looking at, through the lens of our society, that this rock that seems really mellow to our generation was considered, the devil's music. So along those lines, I want to open up the conversation talking to you guys. Obviously, our music has become a lot more explicit and sinful, if you want to go with that term, since the 50s. So the opening question I want to give to you guys is, do you think that there's a line that should be drawn in music, that there's a certain level that where it becomes inappropriate, or is music just a total free expression where there are really no holds barred?
I totally believe it's free expression. There's all different sorts of kind of music. So if we were talking about profane, maybe rap music, but then there's there's Christian bands and everything, and that's not as profane, or not as profane at all. So I mean, it's freedom of speech right there. Yeah.
Right.
I think in a lot of aspects, the line has to be drawn where the society draws it. I think nowadays in our culture, in our generation, our lines are a lot more blurred, as some might say. We're a lot more sinful than past generations, and I think our music reflects that, just like it has in past generations.
So do you think it's a natural progression that we move towards more explicit music? Is that something that's just destined to be?
I just think that the music follows what the generation is doing.
Well, along those lines, there are a lot of people who criticize today's culture of music, who at the time of the 50s, 60s, some of this start of the rock and roll revolution in music, were in great support, because their argument was that the music at that time actually stood for something, and really to a certain degree it is true that rock and roll kind of started a revolution in the culture of the time. So the next question I want to ask is, what do you think culture might look like if rock and roll had been, kind of smothered by these early critics in the 50s? Do you think, how drastically do you think culture would have changed if rock and roll had not emerged as a musical genre?
I think that people today might be less voiced about stuff had this not happened, because it was a big step forward in people being speaking out and stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the rock and roll movement really changed the game up, and I think that this was an important stepping stone for people to have, because maybe they were as outrageous as they were at the time, so that they could get people's attention, and so that they would have more independence and power, so that musicians could really flex their muscles on this, getting their message out. So
you guys seem to be agreeing that rock and roll did kind of create a big cultural shift, a big cultural change at the time. So along those lines, how much of an effect do you think that, generally speaking, in the terms of the 50s, but also generally speaking to our time as well, how much do you think the social climate is affected by the kind of music that is being played? Does it have an effect on people's beliefs? Does it have an effect on things like even the economy, or just on the social climate and the culture?
Yeah, I think it could. You know, I mean, lyrics in a song maybe might people change people's mind, get people talking about something. All sorts of things. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think for instance Elvis Presley. I mean, you know, he broke a lot of barriers in the way he performed, and you know, he was a huge superstar, and people, you know, loved him. And I think his music told a story, but also inspired people to go in a different direction that they have never seen before, because we're still talking about him years later. So, you know, I think it's a good thing. I mean, I don't know.